This is a Pasco Media production. Please visit pascomedia.com.
In Latin, Renovo means to renew, restore, or revive. This is the show where we explore the miraculous nature of the mundane as we look at one part of the Catholic tradition to help you engage more fully in the practice of faith. Past episodes are available at renovopodcast.com. I'm Doug Tuke, and today we are going to talk about Gregorian chant, or really just kind of chant in liturgy. I was at the National Catholic Youth Convention this past November 2017, and my good friend Robert Fiducia, who's been on the show before, he helped kind of direct and produce alongside the National Federation for Catholic Youth Ministry this incredible event, and especially the Friday evening festivities, which was this gorgeous adoration of the Blessed Sacrament where all the young people participated. And he did something that was so cool. He really reintroduced chant into the sacred process. There's lots of ways to celebrate the gorgeous gift that is adoration. Sometimes it's used with contemporary worship music, of which I am a fan, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just silence, of which I'm also a fan. But what Robert did in this production was really kind of say, no, let's kind of show the gorgeous traditions of our church. And I got to tell you, the results were amazing. And it made me think about the power of chant and really kind of its absence in the modern liturgy, or even really our modern understanding of a celebration of the sacred Mass. So I thought I'd do a show on it because it sounds kind of cool. So the church acknowledges Gregorian chant as proper to the Roman liturgy. Therefore, other things being equal, it should be given pride of place in liturgical services. That's from the Constitution on the Sacred Liturgy, number 116, Second Vatican Council. Kind of crazy that that's still very much a part of our language. In fact, here's something you ought to know, and I know this because I was in high school and I remember it. In 1994, the Benedictine monks of Santo Domingo de Silos in Spain released a recording entitled Chant. And to the astonishment of all of us, it actually climbed to the top 5 on the U.S. pop charts. That is amazing. A few years later, the same monks actually released another recording for Christmas entitled Chant Noel, which was a collection of ancient Christmas music. And Chant 2 was then kind of released in response to the popularity of the first recording. That is incredible. And it was received with tremendous open arms. Why then has chant and kind of its sequels, why did it capture so much attention? A lot of young people are kind of asking where this gorgeous music came from and really how it was used in the church. It's kind of amazing. Gregorian chant has been sung in Catholic churches for centuries, okay? In fact, until the end of the Second Vatican Council in 1965, you could hear chant on almost any given Sunday in most dioceses, not all, in the country. And in the space of just kind of a couple of years, it kind of vanished. Where did it go, right? Why is it so infrequently heard at the parish level today? Now, there's really obvious answers to that. Quite frankly, Catholic parishes have grown. There's a lot more of them, and there's a lot less leadership in them. And there just simply are not choir directors. Let's just be really honest. There are folks who are willing to do music, and very few of them are trained in chant. And that is okay. All right. That is okay. But where we're able to do it well, I think it's a bummer. I think it's a bummer that it's kind of not more a part of the beauty of liturgy. Now, here's the thing. Gregorian chant is pretty unfamiliar to a lot of people. Okay, you got to kind of listen to it kind of carefully because there's a lot of details going on. So aside from the fact that it's just beautiful, it's intrinsically beautiful, we also kind of need to respect the fact that it has unbelievable history and great liturgical value. Okay, so in chant, something to think about, the solemnity of the text is raised to an exalted level by being cantillated or intoned to a musical line. What that means is each line, each prayerful lyric is to be meditated upon. So the rhythm of chant is very free. It's kind of governed more by like the rhythms of speech than by musical patterns. So it's very different than your typical guitar chord or folk mass, okay? The melody, when you look at the actual chant like music, it's actually kind of indicated by small little signs above the text. Sometimes they're kind of square or diamond shaped. They're called neumes or Neumes, and first written down in the 10th century. And it wasn't actually until the end of the 11th century that the pitches were accurately written using kind of a system of letters. So the first few chants of the church were sung in Hebrew and then later on in Greek. Now, there's a legend dating from the 9th century, and it kind of tells how Pope St. Gregory I, 590 to 604, compiled the body of plain chant. And it's said that he carefully collected and then kind of arranged all this music that had been handed down over the centuries. And then, of course, the music was called Gregorian chant, and it was spread to all parts of Christian Europe, and it's still sung in daily masses in many religious houses throughout the world. While it's the tradition to attach Gregory's name to the chant, the actual evidence doesn't super support this. So apart from not being a lot of documentation, the liturgical and kind of musical analysis has actually found no strong evidence that the melodies first written down in the 9th century could be as old as Gregory. But regardless, okay, we are certain that Pope St. Gregory is responsible for assembling a liturgical book, Antiphonus Cento, and also for protecting the purity and kind of the integrity of sacred chant by prescribing laws in his papacy and then all the like actual regulations over it. So prayer, meditation, reverence, awe, love, Gregorian chant, it really carries them all in rhythm and in melody. That's a big deal. It's a big contribution to liturgical worship. So more than any other music with lyrics, chant is really kind of considered by the church as heightened speech. Okay, so in chant, the music and the prose are perfectly integrated. That's the vision for its construct. Okay, its function is really specific. It's to add solemnity to Christian worship specifically. So in sacred music, the text is at the heart of the composition. The chief duty of any sacred music, and this is really good to talk about for folks that are out there that love to complain about the music at church. The duty of any sacred music is literally to clothe the text of the liturgy, clothe the liturgical text so that it moves the faithful to devotion and prayer. That's the reason. It's not just so that we know the songs and that they make us feel emotion. That's not what they're designed for, but it's really designed to make the text, the language of liturgy, come alive. Now, chant does this in a really kind of splendid and reverent way, and this becomes pretty apparent when you're listening to a recording. Check out the recording of the Vexilla Regis, Vexilla Regis, or the Pange Lingua, Pangelingua. These are amazing, okay? The chant, it's a heightened form of prayer. The reason I'm dwelling on this is because there's criticism of liturgical music, but there's not really a real advocacy for the folks that are out there really trying to change the way we celebrate song at Mass. Now, I am not arguing that we need to throw it all back to chant only. I don't agree with that. But chant contributed to a heightened spiritual sense in the liturgy, and a lot of modern music doesn't. And if it's not, then it's really not considered good liturgical music. So there's a lot of people in youth ministry that really advocate for just better pop music in Mass. I'm not a super big fan of that, although there's great contemporary worship that brings out the absolute best of liturgy. We can't just have more pop songs. That's not the point of liturgical songs. So church musicians, liturgists, clergy, they kind of need to reflect on the reasons why people are showing like a renewed interest in Gregorian chant. What's it mean in terms of prayer and the way our liturgy has kind of beautifully evolved? And maybe a renewed interest in chant actually reveals kind of a desire to immerse ourselves into a much more a liturgical experience, really, of serenity and peace that kind of takes us away from the distractions of this kind of hectic, our daily lives. You know, I mean, hearing chant can be a really moving experience. I mean, how do you go about learning it? Okay, So let's kind of review. Let's kind of review what the church documents on sacred music provide in terms of guidance, and then also kind of how and when sacred chant can be sung during parts of the Mass, the liturgy, the hours, and then also during kind of other liturgies, like we mentioned before, like adoration. The documents tell us kind of what should be attained when we present music for divine worship specifically. And chant, the church still says this, is the supreme model that the church fathers encouraged folks to use. So in the past 40 years, we know this, a lot of music has been tolerated, and it's kind of difficult to believe that the council fathers and those responsible for liturgical reforms 40 years ago wanted a total absence of chant and even a little bit of Latin from the order of Mass. That's pretty impossible to embrace, but it doesn't mean that there can't be a healthy blending of modern songs. So let's look at the document. So in 1947, Pius XII's encyclical Mediator Dei confirms the norms established by Pius X in Motu Proprio tra le Solecti Dudini, I'm going to say that wrong, and Pius XI regarding any kind of use of sacred music. So some 15 years later, the Second Vatican Council's document on the liturgy, Sacrosanctum Concilium, reiterated and actually expanded the norms for sacred music. The new directives contained specifically in the general instruction on the Roman Missal, provide specific instruction on the use of chant in Mass. So those documents give detailed outlines of how to use music during the sacred liturgy. A lot of that gets ignored. So there's kind of a reluctance on the part of our clergy and certainly our musicians to really embrace it as being kind of apparent. And perhaps the reason for this is that the clergy, musicians, liturgists, they're just not trained in liturgy and sacred music, the aesthetic and the history of the Roman Rite. In the last 40 years have actually kind of left a big mark on our liturgies, a real shift of what that silence and embracing of meditative song can do. So it's really kind of a mark of confusion that kind of blends with other things. Now, again, I'm not saying out with the new, back with the old. I'm not that guy. But it is pretty silly to think that we should just wipe the slate clean of any kind of meditative song that really draws us closer to Christ. You could attribute some of the trend towards chant in looking at the famous Taizé community, where Taizé prayer has found its way into sacred liturgy and sacred song and sacred prayer moments, where we really are repeating these gorgeous lyrics that praise our God. Taizé is just screaming out in popularity. It's kind of amazing. It's very much modern chant in many ways. So here's the thing: the goal is to increase the sense of awe, right, and mystery that we really formally associated with Mass, and in some places it's just not as present. So for like 40 years, there's been a lot of change. The Council Fathers actually drafted instructions specifically designed to protect sacred tradition and kind of the laws of liturgy, and the bishops as kind of caretakers of that tradition in cooperation with clergy, musicians. They really need to strive to kind of improve the quality of music that's used in liturgies. And really more importantly, they should really kind of adhere to the rite of what has kind of been promulgated by the Holy See. So it's really important to understand specifically that maybe the Third Ecumenical Council, it's needed to actually kind of like name some of those difficult things. So the church is arguing sacred music needs to be clearly defined with guiding norms and discipline. And a lot of youth ministers run into that wall of wanting to encourage modern worship in their liturgy, and they kind of bump into that. And that's really best accomplished at kind of a diocesan level. The cathedral is supposed to set the standard. I know in some dioceses that's just simply not the case. Our cathedral has a gorgeous, organ and a choir, and those things are really beautiful, but they're not practical for small rural parishes with tiny little choirs or one or two person musicians that are leading liturgy. That's just not practical. But it doesn't mean that we can't improve the quality of liturgies in music when we really step in and understand the directives. If we look at what the Holy See has to say, Redemptionis Sacramentum, March 25th, 2004, if we really look at what the church is kind of saying, this is the language that ought to really frame what our music and our liturgies sounds like, then I think even the solo guitar, the single piano playing mom who's doing the best they can to help liturgy be great, I think that we have a better sense of what we're trying to accomplish. Here's the thing to remember. chant is really kind of from the beyond. Okay, it's actually designed to really be not of this world, okay? It allows us specifically, and this is the goal of it, to transcend our thoughts in prayer and speak to God, letting tone and language connect us to our Lord in a sacred way. Does all of our liturgical music do that? No, it doesn't. It doesn't. So chant is really kind of a form of sacred art specifically that stems from the pure spiritual, scriptural, and really comes from the heart. It really emanates from the heart. And this is probably the most important thing to remember in this show is Gregorian chant never really left the church. We kind of left it, okay? We kind of said, we're not going to do that anymore. And fortunately, a lot of the pieces that really kind of made it great are kind of beginning to be sung during the Liturgy of the Hours and at Mass. Sacred chant, it's almost like it's been kind of like misplaced, but we're really rediscovering it. We're really reinventing our understanding of what it can do for us. Here's what I want the show to really bring to the forefront. Our young people, and especially our young adults, that long for a countercultural worship experience are not necessarily longing for a popular, enculturated liturgical ceremony. And that's a bold statement because I think many folks that feel the need to make liturgy better in whatever that means, whatever context that means, we're actually forgetting that at its very core, it was always very countercultural. And so song, chant, I mean, is there a time in history where it's been more countercultural than right now? The notion of the use of silence, heartfelt singing, investing ourselves into song that comes from the heart for the direct purpose of praise of our King and Creator. I'm not sure that there is. I know we could argue that Pope Gregory, Saint Gregory the Great, really gathered together the great traditions of chant from church into a volume to maintain its countercultural nature. Think about all the things that we long for in our liturgy. We live to be entertained. Do we go to liturgy to be entertained? That's just crazy. And the thing about sacred music in the modern liturgy is, I think many would argue that our ministers, that the bar has really just been set too low. I think we're reaching the bar, but the bar is crazy low. I mean, who's to say that we couldn't learn and or incorporate some of the beauty of our sacred traditions into Liturgy of the Hours, the Mass, and of course other beautiful liturgies or beautiful devotions like adoration to show this like staunch stance of countercultural nature that is in the church. I love that, man. I'm eating that up. Gregorian chant. It's making a comeback. I'm telling you, it's a big deal. Young people are really driving the force behind this, and I think it's something that we should all be kind of excited about. Check out more information on it. Look up the General Necessary of the Roman Missal, the Germ. We've talked about that before on the show. Look up some of those documents we mentioned and kind of see what the language behind liturgical music is. I have a lot of friends who are liturgical musicians, and they're always wanting to kind of push the boundaries and push the system, the way that we bring music into Mass. But I think a lot of them need to kind of know exactly what the church says about expectations for those things. Yeah, check it out. You never know. You might be chanting at Mass in the coming years. Not all the time. Not at every time. Not every context. Not all the time. But maybe it's something that we ought to bring back into our liturgical experience. You never know. Don't forget to visit renovopodcast.com for past episodes. Please subscribe to, review, and rate our podcast. We always appreciate your input. Your topic suggestions, questions, and or comments are always welcome at doug@renovopodcast.com. Learn more about me at dougtuke.com or on Twitter and Instagram at DTOOKE and the number 1. Friends, always remember to engage the tradition, a tradition that includes Gregorian chant, and live the conversion. Until next time, God bless.